Hey, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And we're back with the pre-holiday edition of the M Squared TechCast. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to scare you half to death in two different ways today. So we've got guests Dan Lohrmann and Richard Stiennon, both cybersecurity experts with us today. And they're going to talk a little bit about this Russian hack of government and other systems that we've heard about, and then give us a little bit of a recap of 2020 and some predictions for 21 as well. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right. So it's officially called Solarwinds because that's the name of the actual brand of the company that did the software that apparently all the government folks use and a lot of other folks, big institutions. And I've been reading a lot about it for the last week, and I flagged stuff and sent it to y'all. I'm sorry, that Memphis y'all comes out. I can't seem to lose it. So let's talk a little bit about. Let's just assume that people just know there was a Russian hack and that's all they know. Richard, why don't you kind of give us some background on that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try and go through the entire timeline as I know it now. So sometime in 2019, a company that sells network management software to most of the world was targeted by a couple of different Russian groups, as a matter of fact. One was poking around and they weren't quite successful. The other may have worked off of what they learned from the B team. And the A team came in and they basically got the signing certificate for software updates and compromised the software update server at the company called Solarwinds. There was even a report that the password to get into that server was SolarWinds123.
Oh, geez.
At any rate, over about 4 or 5 months, they successfully implanted this update. And then starting in March, it was pushed out to what we believe is 18,000 customers of SolarWinds, which, customers of SolarWinds includes 425 of the Fortune 500, all the branches of the military, the Pentagon, and the Office of the President, State Department, etc. And then about 2 weeks ago now, December 7th, we learned that FireEye had been breached, and they announced that they suspected these Russian hackers had stolen all of their hacking tools. FireEye, security vendor that had acquired Mandiant, which does penetration testing for their customers, has their own toolkit. And it's very worrisome if Russian hackers have stolen their top-of-the-line toolkit. So FireEye immediately was completely transparent, told us all about it, attributed the attack to the Russians, or at least, gave us enough indicators that we knew who they're talking about. And then released indicators of compromise, digital signatures for all of their tools. So you could immediately update your own security to block FireEye from attacking you. And then only a week later, we discover, probably because FireEye was digging around and was able to look at the actual malware used of all these other government agencies that had been successfully breached for months, going all the way back to March. So basically the Russian hackers were sitting on these networks, grabbing information, supposedly listening to emails on Office 365 and other servers, and basically owning parts of the State Department, Commerce Department, DHS, maybe CISA, which is the security team inside DHS, and National Institute of Health, and the Treasury Department. So enough critical agencies for us to get all excited about this kind of attack. So, and did they leave anything out, Dan? There's so many little details to this.
Not much. You did a great job. I mean, it's just the scope of this thing is tremendously large, global. And, as we were talking before the show, we don't really know what shoe's going to drop next, what's going to come down the line, how badly this impacted different companies around the world, what were the impacts for them. But we do know it's tremendously impactful in many, many ways in government. A lot of talk in Washington right now about obviously we're in the midst of a change in administrations. What does this mean for that? What does it mean for the Biden team coming in January? So it's not a great time for this to happen. It's never a good time to get hacked, but it's right at the end of the year, and there's a lot of heads rolling right now. A lot of people really are very, very worried.
Yeah, everybody's spending long hours trying to track down. CISA was fantastic, and they released all of the indicators of compromise and a good methodology to determine if you'd been breached. They gave all the government agencies about 16 hours to report if they had been hacked. By Monday of this past week, they had not gotten all those reports. No surprise. Yeah. And then Microsoft came out, and they know of 40 Microsoft customers that have been successfully breached. They won't tell us who those are, of course, because they have to work with them before they have their own disclosures. But they did break down the attacks, and only about 17 were against government agencies, 18 were against other technology companies. So there could very well be in this supply chain other technology companies that are being leveraged in order to attack other companies.
Some of the stuff I was hearing from other folks, I mean, obviously this has been a big talk point on the talk shows and also all these articles, was that they sort of saved all the defense-related stuff until the very last, because then they figured they were going to get discovered once they hit those targets. And so people were calling it just classic espionage, not necessarily cyber warfare. And I know, Richard, you wrote a book about that. What do you think of those premises?
Yeah, I'm getting tired of hearing pundits saying this is all okay. This is espionage as usual. Bad on us for not being better prepared. I don't like that. You wouldn't like it if you were blamed, for being sexually assaulted because of the clothing you wore, or for having your house broken into because you had a bad lock on it, right? It's still the fault of the attacker. Always is, right. Always will be. So I don't like that whole approach, right? I do like to criticize government preparedness and government agencies. I don't like everybody else to pile on. This is, we don't know the repercussions. We don't know if it's just espionage. We don't know if the whole point was reconnaissance before a more malicious type of attack, such as Ukraine saw, where there's certainly a lot of reconnaissance before their power grid was shut down Christmas of 2015. So we've got, like Dan said, the other shoe is going to drop, and it'll keep all of us busy, reporting on it and trying to understand what's going on and trying to explain it for weeks to come.
Yeah, what do you think might have happened in terms of insertion of malware in this attack? Like things where they could, turn off traffic lights or, turn off utilities, or, the really nightmare scenario stuff.
Yeah, a lot of that's been going on for about 4 years already in the power grid. So Sandworm has been installing the same tools that they used in Ukraine throughout our power grid for a number of years, which is worrisome. It even falls in line with the so-called deterrence that even the Biden administration is, when Biden made his announcement, he basically was threatening retaliation and doubling down on deterrence. He said defense isn't enough. And I'm definitely one who falls in the camp of, no, we just need to be really good at defending, and we should beef up defense first before we think about things like threatening to shut off, a foreign country's power, right? Just as they could do to us. It'd be a very effective deterrence against the United States if they had that capability, less so effective against any other country in the world because they don't rely on their power grid as much as we do.
Some of the folks, again, I know maybe this will, you won't agree, but they were saying that this malware is so embedded it just burn the whole thing down and start from scratch because you're never going to be able to get it out. Do you think it's that severe?
Take that one, Dan.
No, I don't. And some of the articles I've been reading, but people I've been talking to, it's more like SolarWinds it's getting you in the door. I think a lot of the fear is what happened when people went sideways. So it's like once you're in the house, now what happens? And so I think there's a pretty good ability to diagnose this, to know who's been hit, to find the DLL, to find the track this down and say, am I a victim? Am I not? Do I have SolarWinds? Do I have the software? But the harder part is, okay, now they've been in your house. What else have they done? What other tools have they installed? Where else have they gone? What other stealthy things have they done in your environment? And I think there's a lot of fear around, okay, we talk about other shoe to drop or other things that may have happened. They've been in there, as Richard mentioned, for months. So what's happened during that timeline, and where else have they gone? What other tool sets have they loaded up? What other actions have they taken? What other back doors have they put in? I think that's a bigger issue. So if you're gonna, I would not advise burning everything else down. But I think maybe somebody who really felt like they're everywhere or this is so bad, it's like, do they have the ability to know what else happened once they got in the house, if you will?
Yeah, and CISA's first recommendation was, if you have SolarWinds, to shut it off. And I thought that was not good advice, because you're going to need SolarWinds to track down some of these infections and to understand what's going on your network. So it's probably not a good idea to just shut off your infrastructure like that. But root around, find it, and find out what it did. And then you have to do the forensics to figure out what happened over the last 6 months.
So what do you think the Biden administration is going to do? Clearly, and Trump continues to deny it's the Russians while everybody else says it is. So I think the Biden folks are going to take a much different tact on this. What do you think they may do next? Or when they get, well, it's about a month now, but when they get installed here in about a month, what are they going to do?
Richard, you want to start?
Yeah, back when Obama was elected, I wrote up a whole a litany of things that they should do. They didn't do any of that in 8 years. And obviously the Trump administration didn't do any of that. And I'm afraid, you can kind of always predict what the Biden administration will do by saying it's a continuation of what the Obama administration did, right? At least, things were fairly stable back then. And most people are happy that we're going to get back to sanity. But for cyber, doing what you did in the past is usually the definition of insanity. So there's, they should really take a fresh look at this. And there's been push for somebody at the top for years, a cabinet level position, a congressional approved position, super cyber czar. Inside the federal government, that is never going to work, right? A cyber czar doesn't have budgetary control. They can't hold back somebody's budget for not following their instructions. All they can do is issue recommendations that you should follow, and then maybe GAO or OMB can follow up and say, hey, you should have followed the cyber czar's recommendations, and now we're going to do some sort of punitive action because you didn't. So from day one, it's when I think of the largest organizations in the world, the way to get to jumpstart your security program is to push responsibility for security down to the actual people that do security. And that we could do in the federal government. So you could tell every agency head, every cabinet person, that there'll be repercussions to your budgets, your congressional efforts, and all the rest if you are breached like OPM was. And that's never happened. Everybody always gets out of jail, get out of jail free card. There are no repercussions in the military. A breach doesn't lead to a court martial, never has, probably never will. And yet, if you're in Cyber Command, or if you're in the, each of the separate branches, and your responsibility is preventing the bad guys from getting in, if you let your guard down physically, you would be court-martialed. Why not get court-martialed if you let your guard down and don't follow best practices in the cyber realm?
Yeah, I would just add real quick, Mike. I think I'm probably not quite as doom and gloom as Richard is on that. But we mentioned earlier the Cyber Solarium Commission. There's a bipartisan commission that has a lot of recommendations. Really, cybersecurity should not be, and in my experience, in my years working in Michigan, but also with Homeland Security in the White House, by and large has not been a partisan issue. And I would say, clearly you could argue, which president did more, going back to Bush. You could talk about, what happened after 9/11. You could talk about the Obama administration, talk about now the new Biden administration, of course, the Trump administration. Reality is, with maybe an exception being the whole discussion we mentioned earlier about Russia, and was Russia involved or not, and Trump kind of, saying they weren't. By and large, I think there's a lot of consensus on the kinds of things that need to happen. I think people want to see a roadmap. I would agree with Richard, we mentioned earlier, the Solarium Commission is a pretty good roadmap. And if they followed those recommendations, they would make a lot of progress. I think there will be some senior appointments in cybersecurity in the Biden administration. Whether they are more successful than the Trump administration remains to be seen.
Yeah, I was going to ask Richard, what would be different in terms of how agencies manage themselves if the kind of accountability that you seek was in place? What do you think would be different?
Yeah, they would reprioritize some of their technology investments. So, purchasing inside government is really difficult. You've got giant budgets, right? $billion budgets for IT stuff. And you spend it, unfortunately, they tend to spend on their favorite projects. So it might be digital transformation. We're going to move to the new government cloud. We're going to do all these great things. But I would take any opportunity to deploy new systems, to deploy them securely and build a framework for that. How are you going to monitor it? How are you going to patch it and update it? Going forward, of course, the entire world is going to be looking very closely at patching and updating software and how do we secure that process. We've known about these vulnerabilities in updates at least since Flame, which is an NSA piece of malware that masked as a Microsoft update, and all the way to NotPetya, which was the most damaging cyber event in our history, which also used software updates from a little accounting company in order to take down Ukraine and most of the rest of the world.
Yeah, 10 years ago, you and I were talking about this as a book theme. When we did our original Cyber Stiletto book, we were trying to figure out what attack vector we were going to use. And we were discussing, the updates. Everybody just automatically clicks, yes, update, whether or not you should or not, right?
Yeah, updates, supply chain vulnerabilities, putting chips, on boards in China before they're shipped. Don't forget, all of our computers come from China, right? So we talk about, don't buy Huawei, and yet we all get our MacBooks shipped directly from a factory in China.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, the other thing, too, that you talked about was Cyber Command. Isn't it their function to defend and be offensive as well? I mean, I've heard that stories that they've got incredible capabilities within the Russian network, too. If they want to shut them down, they can. Is that true or not?
My understanding of Cyber Command's capabilities is a little more opaque than that of the NSA. The NSA, for sure, is deeply embedded. As people start talking about the Me Tooism, hey, it's okay for Russia to do that to us because we're doing it to them, even though we have no evidence of it. We now all kind of agree we must be, right? Because we're better than they are, right? We've got a budget that's probably, the NSA's budget is probably as big as the entire military budget of Russia. So they're doing something with all those people and all that money. So here's a question. Did the NSA see the Solarwinds attacks in the planning phases? And did they know all about it? And could they not say anything about it because it would have revealed their sources and methods? That'll be an interesting story if it breaks.
Yeah, and did they tip off FireEye as well? I mean, there's a lot of other subplots, and they can use third parties and.
Oh yeah.
Because you're a former NSA guy. I mean, obviously you can't share a lot of the secrets, but what Richard said, do you feel like they have those capabilities?
I think Richard's right. I mean, I think, the old thing, first thing they teach you at NSA, you don't know what you don't know. So, I mean, I don't have a top secret clearance anymore. I haven't worked there. I haven't had a TSSI clearance since the late 90s. So, but a lot of friends work in that community. And I'll tell you, I know we have capabilities. I obviously we won't talk about specifics. The reality of it is that this is going on. And a lot of the smaller players are trying to get into the game. I mean, more and more stories around the world, nation states feel like this, the internet could be the great equalizer. It's they don't have billions of dollars to build nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers and satellites and put people on the moon and everything else. But a lot of them feel like, hey, I can compete in cyberspace. So, virtually every country in the world that's out there, has a program trying to do something to hack somebody. So it's going on. It's happening all over the place. And I do believe we have a lot of capability within the U.S. as well. So I'll just leave it at that.
Matthew?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So what do you think ought to happen going forward here from the standpoint of business, not so much government, but business? How do businesses protect themselves better from this kind of thing?
Well, I think the most immediate change is going to be, we're going to look at the signing of software, digital signatures of software updates, and how can we build trust back in? Because right now you just set up a couple APIs and you just download the updates when they're ready. And it's been forever best practice to update them automatically. Just do it, because they're patching some vulnerability they've discovered. And obviously that is not wise, and we have to do something more to trust that. I'm wondering, Dan, what do you think of I imagine a third party. That's what we have PKI for. We could have a trusted certificate authority that's signing the other ones, but that would just centralize all that control, and that would be a target for a nation state to go after, and then they get update everybody with false stuff. So, not quite sure how to fix this.
It's hard because it's always people, processing, and technology. And so people always say, can't you build a perfect technology? Can't you? But, somebody's got to use it, and there's truth in that, old adage, if you had a perfectly secure computer, nobody could do anything. And it's even if you have great technology, the processes can be flawed. The people could be flawed. We know what happened. Again, some people call him a hero. Some people call him a traitor. But, Snowden. I mean, there's so many stories of people, going back decades, going back, in our history of our country. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be vulnerabilities. And I like the idea, Richard. I think we have to definitely improve that whole patching process. The update process. I think more needs to be done there. But and as soon as somebody tells me they have the perfect technology that can't be hacked, I just laugh because you've got the people side, you've got the process side. Somebody can get in there. A trusted insider can do something that can cause the problem.
Well, that's the Snowden situation. He was the trusted insider, right?
Correct, exactly.
Of course.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left. I know it's not much time, but let's talk a little bit about 2021. Obviously, this is going to be with us probably for most of 2021, right?
Yep. Fixing
this problem. But beyond that, what do you see developing in the cybersecurity space next year?
I'll start.
Go for it. You
jump in. I just published a blog. People can go to it. I think Mike, you guys are gonna post this. But the top 21 security predictions for 2021. These aren't my predictions. These are the industry. What I do is catalog every year. Everybody from Trend Micro to WatchGuard to FireEye, going right down the list. They all come out with really good reports. I'm actually an advocate for them. I know other people not so much. We had a horrible year predicting in 2020 because COVID hit us and nobody was predicting COVID-19. But they're a really good list of items that a lot of research have gone into these. They aren't just sticking your finger in the air and just saying which way the wind's blowing and guessing. A lot of trends around specifically, people working from home. COVID-19 has changed all of our processes. So what has that caused in way of challenges for us? Issues related to the cloud, issues related to mobile, which we saw last year as well. But certainly more and more challenges with ransomware that have just exploded. Those are all just some of the predictions that are listed in the top 21 security predictions for 2021.
Yeah, we'll be sure to post those this week. This morning you sent that to me and I didn't get a chance to post it yet, but we'll get that up there. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't like writing predictions, right? Because I used to do that, and some of them would eventually come true. But anyways, it takes a lot of guts, right? Maybe I'm getting too old to have the guts. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that we saw a gigantic surge in phishing attacks at the beginning of COVID, right? 600% increase using, just social engineering around tax credits and employment checks and all the rest. And we've seen some ransomware that came out of that, which would have been the early intent of the attackers. But some of those attacks were probably successful enough that the attackers got a foothold. So it's easy to predict in the first 3 months of 2021, we're going to see a lot of breach announcements for huge data sets, very damaging to the companies that it happened to. And that's just the fallout from what happened in March of 2020. The other thing that I'm kind of happy about is that the technology around working from home, which did open up a lot of exposures, right? Because you took your employee base and you pushed them all out to their home networks, which weren't very safe. It's going to change the way that employers treat the technology that their employees use. And we're going to start seeing employers invest in home technology. So they're going to maybe, double up on bandwidth. So the employee doesn't have to worry about all the kids being on their Zoom calls for school during business hours, and adding security in, of course, SASE being the term of the day, and giving us more and more capabilities. It's going to be great. We're all going to have great microphones, great webcams, dual internet access. I've got my new router behind me there, so that's just serves my little writing shed. Satellite backup. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's one of the stories I just posted from Forbes that talking about not necessarily the cybersecurity aspect, but now that we've all got exposed to the fact that we really can work from home, at least the white collar workers can. Obviously, if you're an electrician or a plumber, you can't do that. But are they going to want to go back to the office? And if not, then what's that going to mean? Like you just said, for all that equipment, we're going to be selling people to work from home, right?
Yep. And people can move around finally, so, and it seems to be having an impact on certain real estate in certain areas, right? Tahoe is booming, right? The people are just moving from the Bay Area to Tahoe because they might as well. I know my stepdaughter's moving for a few months to Colorado because she has to work remotely for University of Georgetown. It's great. Opens things up for people.
And I want to get my bar stool set up in Key West, and I'm going to have the mic there and, all the stuff so I can sit there and drink my mimosas and things and do my show, right? That'd be perfect.
And you better have palm trees blowing in the wind behind you.
That's it. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm looking out my window now at the snow. That's why I was thinking of Key West. So.
Well, and what do you tell the bosses that still insist on people coming to the office, still insist on FaceTime?
I've seen people criticizing those bosses saying, your times are numbered. You can't insist on people coming into the office. So new managers of the future will be good at doing Zoom calls.
All right. Well, we're out of time. I want you guys, the traditional shameless plug. I know you've been on the show many times. So, Richard, let's start with you since you're on camera right now. How do people reach out to you, get more information, work with you, that sort of thing?
Yeah, just start by following me on Twitter @CyberWar, and I'll see you there. If you're a vendor, I'll definitely follow you back. If you're in the security, I'll follow you back.
Okay, Dan, working from that office in where are you, Okemos? I think it is.
Holt, Michigan.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah,
all right.
at GovCSO, and you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. It's the same as Richard. Happy to respond to, and certainly visit my blog for Government Technology Magazine, Lohrmann on Cybersecurity.
And now Dan, former state CISO, is working for Security Mentor. Been doing that for 4 years now, something like that.
Just over 6.
Really, has it been that long?
Yeah,
Time does fly, doesn't it?
Thanks
All
so much.
right. Well, very informative. Thank you guys for joining us here at the end of the year. We'll get you both back on here real soon in 2021 when our next situation arises. Right, Matt?
Absolutely.
Additional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.